This is Nicola. In the summer of '04, Usher released the album entitled Confessions, and it chronicled the demise of his relationship with another famous pop star from TLC. And he spoke very openly and candidly in these songs about betraying her, about his infidelity, about how hard all of this was on him. And you could not go anywhere in the summer of '04 without that song pumping out of a car speaker, in a restaurant, in a dressing room. And we wondered, where is this woman? Is she in a bunker somewhere? And so that just got us thinking about how behind every famous song, there's a real woman out there somewhere who's inspired it. And what must it be like for these women when it's your ex, when it's someone you're trying to get over or get past, and you cannot escape this music that everyone else loves. So we just couldn't let go of that idea, and we started brainstorming around, and pretty soon we actually had the genesis for the idea for our novel, and that was the jumping off point.
This is Emma, and Nikki and I have been collaborating together creatively for about 7 years now. And we approached this book as we've approached our last two. And our process is to start with the seed of an idea, like Nikki just explained, the seed for dedication. And then we brainstorm for quite a period of time and flush out an outline together. And then we break up the outline into scenes, which can run anywhere from a couple paragraphs to a couple pages. So we have an outline, and we break the outline up into a couple of paragraphs or a couple of pages. Basically, we break it into scenes, and we go off and generate separately and work on our scenes to get a first draft. And during that process, as soon as we're finished with our scenes, we send them to each other to edit. And that's kind of how we get a loose first draft. And in addition to that, usually there are scenes that neither of us want to approach on our own, so we do some scenes shoulder to shoulder together. And then once we have a first draft of something, then really from that point on we're together, sitting in front of the computer and editing sentence per sentence. And then that's kind of how we get the second draft. And from that point on, we print it out and we read it over and over and over together in a room together. Sometimes I make Nikki read it out loud to me. Sometimes, I guess very rarely, I read it out loud to her. We've noticed that it kind of lives differently on the page, or when you hear the story being told, or even on the computer screen. We vet it over and over again until we feel it's everything it needs to be. And actually, Nikki, dedication was a little bit different. Do you want to talk about that?
Because dedication goes back and forth in time, we actually divided it every other chapter, which was the first time that we'd done that. So in effect, Emma took one of the storylines and I took the other storyline. And it was sort of the only way that we could hold the continuity in our heads and make sure, because you were skipping out of the story and coming back to it, that there was a consistency of narrative. And then we edited it together for months and months and months and months. So we both had a hand in both parts of the story, but that was the first time that one of us was writing pages and pages on our own. Because this novel examines a relationship between two people when they were in high school and now in the present day when they're 30, we thought about trying to do it initially as flashbacks, but that felt unsatisfying and it wasn't meaty enough. So we realized that these were actually two fully fleshed out stories taking place a decade apart, and that they should just weave in and out of each other, and that what was happening in the present and what was happening in the past could play very well off of each other without ever really having to acknowledge one or the other in the alternate time frame. That's why we decided to do it that way. And I had the infinitely easier job of trying to track a story in the present day. Emma had the much larger challenge, and thank God for Google, of having to go back in time and remember exactly what movie came out in September of 1987 and when did Dayglow Socks come in. So it was Emma had the research-heavy part of it.
But again, that was just for the first draft. I think actually a lot of the 80s details, we layered them in as we were working together. And once we were sitting side by side, once you remember the Dayglow Socks, then you remember
the swatch.
Right, the swatch and the Pepsi Cola line of clothing. Like, it all just starts to come tumbling back. But I think another reason that we wanted to tell the story in the two storylines in the two time periods is we wanted to speak to the kind of cognitive truth of how first love lives on in your brain. And for this character, there's a part of her that got stuck because of the trauma of what happens in her relationship with this boy and the trauma of what happens in her family as she's growing up. So we've talked in our own experience and in our friends, it's not uncommon that going back to your family home, there are moments where you find yourself kind of spinning between, am I 12, am I 30, am I 40, am I 5? Just those moments where time kind of stops. And so we thought that by running both movies simultaneously, we were kind of trying to address in her present brain that both stories are continuing to happen for her, which is part of what's driving her need for resolution.
I think that adolescence is a time at which you are figuring out where the bar is set, and you're getting wonderful examples of the kind of adulthood you think you might want to lead one day, and you're also getting examples of things you know empirically in your bones you do not want, whether it's a friend's family that might be falling apart, or someone who comes into your life, a teacher or a counselor, or someone who really inspires you and shows you what is possible and what kind of things you want to strive for. So I think that it can make a profound impression.
The primary relationship in the book is between Jake and Kate, but we also really wanted to explore Kate's relationship to her parents and what it is to become an adult and navigate an adult relationship with your parents. And, you know, the transition that's required, not just their letting go, the parents letting go of Kate and acknowledging that she's grown up, but Kate letting go of her childhood and acknowledging that she's grown up, and Kate acknowledging that there is a transition in their relationship to meet them afresh as adults. And I think that that's something, parents get a lot of pressure to let their kids grow up, but I think children equally have the task as they grow up of letting their parents grow up and kind of re-meeting them. And as we're in our early 30s, that's something that we're observing a lot around us, that 30-something adjustment. So we really wanted to explore that and see what the roots of what Kate's having a hard time letting go of and why, and then see in real time, in the present, how she navigates that.